Higher.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Dr. Cammy and Karen Go Keto. Today we are joined by Mike Collins, the sugar-free man. Mike and Cammy and I are doing these sessions regarding Cammy Quit Sugar. Right, Mike? You're in charge of the Quit Sugar Summit. Is that what it's called?
That's it. Yeah.
And Cammy and I are on our way to transition to a sugar-free lifestyle, carnivore lifestyle, ketogenic lifestyle. And we are coming from a standard American slash atrocious diet. So that's where we are. We've been here since August of 2023. And for those of you who have joined us before, thank you very much. And Cammy, Mike, who wants to start us off?
Well, Kimmy was talking about something super interesting. Maybe she can kind of tee it up again and we can get through.
Okay, I was talking before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about feelings and about how I still feel like I need to do some inner child work to get to the heart of the matter of what goes on with me not taking good care of myself and not eating healthy food and binging or eating sugar or flour and not being on a carnivore diet. And I have a hard time. So I have a new therapist that I'm seeing, and we were talking about that the other day about how I talk to myself as if I'm younger, like 6 years old. And then as I talk to myself as a 6 year old and I get good at that, I can start, advancing the age so that pretty soon I'm just talking to myself as a grown adult. And I am having a hard time visualizing my young self, talking to my young self, understanding my young self, relating to my young self. And so we were kind of talking along those lines. And I think all of us here agree that it does happen in the body, and that book is so fabulous.
I did not agree to that because I disagree.
Okay, sorry. Karen doesn't agree with that, but Mike and I are on the same page about how the body keeps a score, and your body will store all these things. And until you really go in and get it out of your body, you can think about it in your head all the time, as long as you want. And that's when I always talk about how things happen in my head, and I can think it in my head, but getting it to my heart is the part that takes the really hard work. So we're kind of here to bat that issue around a little bit.
So the reason why I disagree with that is because you're separating your head from the rest of your body, your brain from the rest of your body. And I think that the brain is the body.
But the brain doesn't
The brain is
feel.
just as much as your teeth, as your arm. So why you can't store pain in your brain and not have it in any other part of your body? Like for me, I know I store stress in my right shoulder, right? I've done that since grade school. But to say that my brain's not what runs it, I think just the way that you and Mike were talking was like your brain was separate from the rest of your body. And I think that that's not a holistic view. And that the brain, because why else would you be talking to yourself as a youngster? The talking is going to be in your head, right? In your brain. So I just feel that it doesn't necessarily have to reveal itself in your body. If you feel that your body, and when you say you don't feel it in your body, you do feel it in your body. It's just in a different part. It's just not a physical part of your body that you can acknowledge.
I think it's an interesting construct that
Could be your soul.
you could store pain in your brain.
Could be your soul.
Yeah.
Could be your fascia. It's all connected, but I think the brain is what runs it.
I do
Or,
hear a pain being stuck in fascia.
oh, I've done Rolfing, so
Yeah.
it's still stuck there because I couldn't do the Rolfing for that long.
I never even bothered to try.
I've done it, and I've seen other people seem to get a lot of like movement forward when they roll. It's like it breaks a log jam of some kind.
Okay, so for people who don't know what rolfing is, it's just where people are with your body, as far as I understand, I've never had it done, and they physically are rubbing the fascia of your body in different various areas with something that causes the fascia in theory to release. And the process of doing that, like with various instruments to actually physically rub your body in that certain area in a hard fashion, causes pain.
It's hard. I mean, it's like a massage that, like the deepest massage you ever got in the weirdest places you ever had.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I think that the body and the brain do communicate together, but I do kind of relate to my brain a little bit separate in some ways to my body, because I know, like, when I'm talking to Kai, my life coach, and we start talking about something, and he says get in the elevator and take the elevator to your heart. And so I imagine myself getting in the elevator and taking the elevator from my head down into my heart. And then when I speak like from my heart, and I speak like what's really true and what's deeper for me than my frontal lobe of my brain, I can get to areas that are more meaningful to me than in my head. So that's just kind of, it might just be semantics, but that's just like the way that I imagine it in my body. But I don't think you talk like that, right, Karen? You don't think about like going from your head to your heart and speaking from your heart.
I would say it's more like a sponge. And if you were to say to me, speak from your heart, I would say that because I think I would look at it more as a cellular translation that the speaking comes from your frontal cortex. It doesn't come from your heart. Your heart pumps your blood.
Interesting.
I think that the thought process is that addicts in general get stuck in their brain and they loop things and it goes around and around, and this, and they are disconnected from their feelings, from their emotions, the stuff that we teach all the time. You're disconnected. You're thinking of it as a figure outable problem. Addiction is a figure outable problem, that you can figure this out. You can do the right steps. You can eat the right food. You can, do the right exercise, and you will solve the problem. What it seems to be, and I think, all the stuff that you're talking about, Tammy and Cammy, is that the block, if you will, is not in your brain, or you'll be able to visualize it, or you'll be able to figure it out. The block is that you have, and the common slang lingo is, you have tamped down emotional life, that when you feel the emotional stuff, you don't feel it in your brain. You feel it in your, like when you're like having a cathartic moment and crying, it starts to come up. It's like it, and that's a good analogy, because it does feel like it's coming up and out, but it seems to be a whole body. Like for me, it's mostly like a main core, like the chest and the heart and the stomach and the gut. The whole brain in the gut stuff. It feels like it's gut wrenching, right? And that term people use, and that we have been able mentally through practice to suppress that. And you can suppress it mentally, and you can do it with process addictions like gambling or whatever. You can do it, you can suppress it, and that you are using the, how should I say, the substance or the process to help you stop that feeling from coming up, because you came from chaos, and you came from worry and fear and angst, and you didn't want to have chaos, worry, fear, and angst. So you used whatever it was. At that time it was sugar, and then it became something else or whatever. But it's that stuff is locked in that core, in that gut wrenching, in that heaving of crying, and then it begins to surface or come out and come up. And so, and again, I think like a meditation or like a practice, it's reversing a practice that was detrimental, because that ability saved your life, like literally physically saved your life, that you didn't feel that uncontrollable at 6 years old, 8 years old, 20 or 10 years. You didn't. And when you got older, it persisted because you had a life and kids and school, and you couldn't break down, and you couldn't let it out, and you couldn't have that gut wrench, and you couldn't have that heaving and that crying, right? And so you learned a practical skill that worked well at 6, 8, 10, 12, and 15, but then stopped working well. And I do believe that we can mentally do it. And we have to unwind that practice, unwind that. Again, don't think of it as a bad practice. It was a good practice, but now it doesn't serve us anymore. So,
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Sarah Wakefield or Wakeman in addiction?
it sounds familiar.
She was just interviewed by Diary of a CEO,
Oh, really?
Stephen Bart. I think his name is Stephen Bartlett. And I was listening to her, and their conversation was interesting. I didn't listen to the whole episode, but she was saying about addiction and that we haven't been looking at addiction in the right way, or that, the medical community maybe hasn't been looking at addiction the right way. What they got to was that the way to work out addiction is through psychotherapy, medication and psychotherapy,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought is how they've been doing it for years and years. And I thought, well, what is the difference? If you're going to use medication, isn't that just a substitute for the actual, just like you were saying, like you don't want to substitute painful running for gambling, right? Like, okay, I don't gamble anymore, but now I run and I can't stop running and I run through pain because that's what I need
Right.
to. And I just thought it was interesting because I have this theory that it all is about your food. It's not about the drugs you take. It's about the food that you're not taking,
Yes.
right? That's why the carnivore works right. That's why the carnivore works is that you're putting in all the nutrients that you need, and up until you start carnivore, you are not getting the nutrients that you need. And
Mm.
that's why I think, and that's for your whole body, right? Not just your brain. Even though your brain may work most of the working parts, the nutrients need to be there in your body. And not only are you not getting your nutrients if you're not eating your meat, the other stuff that you're putting in there, right? The alcohol or the sugar
Yeah.
is making more of a detrimental situation in your body.
No,
And
what you're describing is accurate in that, without the abstinence, you never return to that state, that the other products are not really food at all. The food, the idea that food has a message for the body, or has a message for the body, chemically has a message for the body. Those foods, activate dopamine, which would be activated by and like I said, when I say dopamine, I need them. I mean them all: endocannabinoid, everything. And so when it activates the dopamine, it really is skipping the reward process. You didn't have to hunt down an animal. You didn't, it like short circuits it. And then when you eat right, keto or carnivore, you end up healing that misuse of the system that was created to keep you healthy and wholesome, right? And so I know that what you're describing is correct, in combination with everything that we've also talked about. You know what I mean? I agree with that.
and I don't think that the other work is going to stick unless you have, not, or not, let's put it this way, not easily stick. I think you're working more on willpower, right? Or
100% right. You are 100%. It comes back to the anchoring, like the NLP construct of anchoring feelings, and that my thing of internal cutting, where you're not dragging a razor across your arm, but you are manipulating your ability to feel, the way that you feel, by substances internally, right? And you're right. Until you come to the factory settings, you can't even begin the healing process, because you're always playing, you're tinkering with it. You're figuring out, like, well, 2 cups of coffee instead of one word. You're trying to balance it out, like a drug addict trying to balance his drugs out.
well,
Yeah, I was just going to say the difficult part for me is getting back to the factory settings,
Yes.
from where you are, because you're saying until you get to your factory settings, you can't, change what's going on. Well, how do you get to the factory settings without changing what's going on? You keep doing what you're doing.
Abstinence will force it.
Mhm.
Right. But how do you stay abstinent?
Well, again, the idea that none of this is willpower or whatever is like, I mean, obviously community works, information works, support works, guidance works, sponsorship work. These things,
So it's just a combination of a bunch of
it's a
things that you have to
combination.
keep coming at it from all different angles.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. How big is your why? I mean, and Sarah did mention, because Stephen brought up the until you hit rock bottom, right? That's when you hit rock bottom is when you're going to change. But here's the interesting thing. I talked to somebody the other day and I said they were complaining about various health issues. And I said, well, the carnivore diet is a really great way to get rid of a lot of chronic disease and chronic complaints. And, that's just eating fatty meat until you're full, and just keep doing that. When you're hungry, eat fatty meat until you're full. And he said, oh, I can't give up my vegetables. I said, well, okay, that sounds like you're addicted to vegetables then, right? Why would you not be addicted to vegetables if you can't give up your vegetables, right? It's a construct that you've put into place to say, I'd rather have these complaints and I'd rather have these ailments because I can't give up my vegetables, right? Not sugar, vegetables.
Yeah, I think you're describing what I've discovered recently, and gotten kind of strong on that. Like, in a lot of ways, and this comes right back to your idea of the brain being part of this emotional life, or the feeling life, is that in essence, and I don't want to say it's 100% carnivore or whatever, but I do want to say that, with the hybridization of vegetables over the years, people's frontal cortex is not in a place to make the necessary decisions. That's why we have to come back to the factory settings, so that whatever's actually happening is forced through your body. Like, they literally are not able. I don't care if they're doctors or lawyers or rocket scientists. Their frontal cortex has been hijacked, has been adulterated, has been taken over. This emotional management system that they have in their life is not working right because it's been taken over, right? It's been hijacked. And until you get to the factory settings and you begin to heal and conquer whatever the actual life brings you without those substances, you're not going to heal. You know what I mean? You can't even start.
I disagree. I think you can still start. One of the things that you have to get over is you have to have the leap of faith that the carnivore way of eating is effective and going to work. And you don't have to do it like 100% belief, but you have to give it a good faith effort and try it out, right? And try it out right so that you don't have the gut biome issues that give you the explosive diarrhea, or you get past that, right? That's just like saying, okay, well, I'll take a drug even if it makes me, gives me dry mouth or something, right? You still get past it, you still take the drug, you get over that side effect. But what I think that the world is facing is not just the vegetables, but the the messages in the world are just brainwashing, right? It's can't I watch the TV with my mom and I watch the food channel. I watch, like the food, the chopped, and those shows where they're making food out of whatever crazy ingredients, and or they've got 20 minutes to make a three-course meal. And boy, it's so easy in carnivore. You just make a steak, right? But you can do a steak in 20 minutes. But at any rate, there's ads for beer that look really great. There's ads for Coca-Cola that look great. There's ads for, all kinds of food. The Outback ad, and the three-course meal for 19.99, and the Olive Garden ad, and then you get the drug ads, and it's all the same message. Just keep putting stuff in your body. You remember the old phrase, I can't believe I ate the whole thing?
Right.
When you think about that, what message is that sending? You can go ahead and overindulge, and we'll give you a pill so that you don't have to have the ill effects of it. And not accepting that the ill effects are not just the fact that you've got indigestion, it's doing something else to your body. As you said, hijacking your frontal lobe.
I think we're saying the same thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying the exact same thing.
But the messaging is so strong out there, right? It's everywhere you go. And until there's a unified message, and you said, I don't know about carnivore, it's like, I can tell you that's the unified message. You have to go back to how we were when we were hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, but also you also have to include in this fear, which is real and very inbred, that you are leaving literally the human race. You're leaving a tribe that, like you say, 95, 98, 99% of the world believes in the old world that has evolved wrong because it hijacked the frontal lobe, and because the commerce and addiction blended together over centuries to create where we are now. And that leaving that is scary enough. Like leaving and becoming this different is scary enough. You know what I mean? And that's most of the problems with working people in recovery is their social issues around the behavioral change process they've used, even if it's just stopping sugar, right? That's enough of a fear in their family and in their life that they won't belong.
But you said something, Mike, that I want to point out. Your languaging was that we evolved wrong. I don't think we evolved wrong at all. I
Yeah,
think
I
this
think
is
what he's trying to say is that, as we became industrialized and how all of this stuff occurred, we kind of took a path that
No,
was
it's an
on.
evolutionary wrong turn.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's a wrong turn. I
How,
think it's the completely right turn.
then why do we need to fix it?
Well, we don't need to fix it. All that we can say is that if you want optimal health and a happy and joyous life, you eat a different way, and you eat the way that our ancestors ate.
That's again a mental construct, and it's like it's not a physical
So,
in real body construct, because everybody else is doing the opposite. And the reason everybody else is doing the opposite is because there's been 20 generations between what you're asking us to do and what everyone else is doing. So you've got to break from the tribe again, a second time.
right. But the thing is, for me, the message is it creates the people who want to be exceptional and want to be outside the tribe and create a new tribe. And here's the thing. All of that allowed the industrialization allowed us to get to where we are with the possible singularity point. And so who knows this, because think about it. We might be just talking for this like this for a few years. We may just be putting little nanobots in there and it'll just tell us, okay, you can't, you just have to eat fatty meat right now. And then maybe it'll measure things and say, oh, but you can eat a little bit of cake right now. And, a little bit of cake will be okay. But that's all based on a measuring system that is based on a diet that, like, all of these measurements came post hunter gatherer
I don't
food
disagree with what
process.
you're saying, but what if, here's a good what if we never took that wrong turn and they never introduced the slavery and the tea and the coffee and the sugar from, Great Britain and the whole thing? What if like somebody discovered carnivore in the 15th century in Great Britain, or the 14th century in Great Britain, and that's how the whole human race, would we have already been to nanobots?
Well, I think that's exactly what they did do. Well, maybe not, because the kings and the queens were eating sugar and stuff. I think so. Where we are, we created a medical community to solve our ills, right? We've
Right.
created a whole medical and a whole government system that says, take care of us. And now we're learning those systems don't work for us. Those systems have broken down. And the tribe is now saying, you can live in that system if you want. We have to live to some degree in that system. But if you want to live healthy and joyously, you have to be willing to break away and not let the government take care of you, not let the medical community take care of you, and let a new tribe be your and with the internet we can allow that tribe to be worldwide, whereas we couldn't back in the 10,000 years ago.
We're saying the exact same thing, but what I'm saying is that breaking from the tribe that currently exists is no easy feat for most people.
Well, no, because the conversation is not break from the tribe. With conversations like this that says break from the tribe, be strong, be brave, it will bring you joy. right? Because we're not saying that the message is break from the tribe just for the hell of it. Break from the tribe because you look great with the tattoo. It says break from the tribe because you won't have heart disease. You won't have anxiety. You won't.
This is why we're pounding the drum.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's so it will, maybe the world will be smaller, but maybe it brings back regenerative farming, right? And we have communities, we live in a communal system. My father's family is from a commune. That is, how he came over, how his family came over here from Sweden to build a commune. And I think it's a fine way to live in smaller tribes because that's the reason why it was created in the first place. You can
Right.
feed the masses, not healthy, but you can keep them alive to do work for you.
Well, again, we agree on the evolution, and now we're trying to get the solution. Let's get back to
Well, and I just want to say that I think that it's getting easier to break away from everybody else because we're getting communities out there that are growing and that are growing quickly, hopefully, that we're getting carnivore communities. And with the internet, there's so much that you can do. There's so many meetings. Karen and I just did a video. I'm going to release it this week that talks about all the different conferences that are going on and all the different places where you can go and be like submerged into a carnivore community where they feed you all this, carnivore food. And the sugar, with what's going on with our sugar addiction groups and how we're working on getting all those groups together where people and, like-minded people come together to support each other. It's getting better and better with time. So it's getting easier and easier to break away when you need to.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the macro, and I'm happy to. Well, I'll talk about it all day long, but let's look at Cammy's situation where Mike in an individual place, it's like how do you break through? Like, 'cause we're giving a one person example here of working to the I don't want to say utopia, but the ideal situation that you're describing and that I'm describing, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say? What are the stumbling blocks? I mean, you had mentioned, and we had talked about this thing evolved from us talking about this delineation between brain and body.
Well, I think that what's going on with me right now is that I'm having more time in my life where I am living healthy and I'm doing what I need to do. I'm making good choices. I'm on a carnivore diet. I'm dealing with upset in healthier ways. And a big thing that upsets me is when I screw up, when I feel that something happens and I screw up. Like the other day, I was made an agreement with somebody to lead a meeting, and then my nephew got involved in a playoff baseball game, and I ended up going to the game because I was excited about the playoffs, and I completely forgot about leading this meeting until it was like 2 minutes before it started. So all I could do was text her and say I'm not going to make the meeting, and she was very kind and just said, "Don't worry about it. We'll catch you next time." And somebody else could lead the meeting, but when I have that upset, and interestingly, as we were talking about it earlier, I think I do feel something when that happens in
Hmm.
my body. And I just don't remember what it is because I'm too busy thinking about how I screwed up. And next time I'm going to pay closer attention to where it is in my body. I think this time it might have actually been toward my back, like in the middle of my body toward my back, like almost like push it back. But I managed that perfectly fine. And the way that I did it was with a lot of good self talk. And I just said, look, you're going to make mistakes. You're human. You're supposed to make mistakes. This is what, humans do. And when you make mistakes, you want to deal with it in a healthy way. So what are you going to do right now? Well, I'm not really hungry. I don't need to eat right now. I'm not tired. I don't need to sleep. I was driving home from the baseball game. I listened to some nice music. I just soothed myself in a healthy way. And that really pleased me because in the past, I would have been eating about it or I would have been not processing it
Right.
and talking myself out of it and then letting them kind of build to where I binge. And that's what, I think when we were looking at before I started working on going carnivore, we were looking at my binge history, and it's every 3 to 4 weeks I go on these big huge binges. And I think it's almost like things build up until that time and then I binge.
Right, which is an unconnected way of dealing with things in the past. And I think when we've talked about your binge episodes, your binge things, when we reduced it, and you were there last night when I reduced down to her losing her daughter, basically. Like, it doesn't take that much digging to figure out what is really going on. What are you really obfuscating? What are you really not feeling, right? You're binging and not feeling because you don't want to feel those feelings that, visiting your mother at the center or whatever. Those are feelings that, and you don't make that, yet make that conscious connection. You're making the conscious connection that I think the question you would ask is like, when you begin to binge or before you binge or after you binge is like, what did I not want to feel to do that? You know what I mean? Which again comes all the way back full circle to your in the body stuff, right? It's like, what did I not want to heave about, gut wrench about, about, you know what I mean? It's like, what is it? And then you sit with yourself and you breathe and you go to yoga and you do self-care until you get the answer. And then you solve it in a holistic way and not with a substance, right? And then your body heals and cleanses from the stuff that, theoretically is stuck, that is not of the conscious understanding. It's an unconscious understanding. It's an automatic response to use sugar because that worked for many years. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very dependable.
So, Cammy, when I called you this morning and said I was going to be a few minutes late getting on, and you said I am too, what went through your brain then?
A victim role kind of went through my brain where it's like, yeah, I'm going to be late because I have to get up at 6 a.m. and those guys don't have to get up. Those guys don't have to be on till 8 or 9 a.m. And so I'm justified to be late because it's so early.
But you didn't feel like you screwed up.
No, because I could justify it.
So you felt like so when you have a scheduling glitch, right? You're not showing up on time to our video and you not showing up for leading your meeting. To me, it looks like the same thing. So what's in your world? Do you have a calendar? Like, what made you beat yourself up over the one where you didn't show up for your meeting? What's the distinction, right?
Well, I think it was that I couldn't really justify that. And there were a lot of people that I had let down, that I felt like I had let down in that meeting because there's going to be, 20 people there.
But they didn't know you weren't there yet.
No. But there is this distinction.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there is this distinction in my head where I say I screwed up. I actually use the F word. I effed up. And when I say that to myself in a certain way with a certain tone of voice and a certain it's kind of like the voice it's the look I've seen my mom give me, which is, I call it my disgusting, disapproving voice. When I hear that, that's when it happens. There's a shift in me that happens. It's an energy shift because the other day I experienced it very vividly.
And so what's the difference between not showing up on time for this and not showing up for so you said it was you were going to let people down. Well, don't think that Mike and I weren't going to be let down because you didn't show up on time. And not to mention, that's living in the future. Maybe they were delighted that you were going to show up because you really don't do a good job, right? I mean, like this is a story that you make up is they're going to be disappointed. Therefore, therefore I need to flagellate is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
I think so, yeah.
Spank myself for being a bad girl, as opposed to just having a schedule glitch and seeing if somebody else can take care of it.
You're absolutely right. I think what happens is that sometimes I'll realize that I'm human and that humans make mistakes and that that's okay. Sometimes I won't realize that. I'll be like in my old mode where I was like the perfection. Part of that old mold was perfection. And so if I'm in my old mold and perfection is what's supposed to happen, and I don't have perfection because I made a mistake, then that's when I'll go down that whole pathway. It's a different pathway that I'll go down.
Right. And it's, maybe that's your 6-year-old conversation, but the question is, do you have a schedule? Like, why did you, do you not look at a schedule? Do you not have an alarm that goes off that says, oh, I should be prepping for my my leading, if I'm going
Yeah,
to be
no,
leading
I do.
something.
I have a calendar that works generally very well, but when week before when I said I would lead the meeting, I forgot to put it on my calendar. So it wasn't on my calendar to give me the 30-minute warning that I'm supposed to be there.
Yeah, so that might be the kind of the conversation that you have with the other person, right? I'm like, boy, I misscheduled. So if you really need me to show up, I can show up, but I'm going to miss my, baseball game or whatever. And they're like, no, we can take care of it, right? And it's just like when I called you and said, hey, we're going to be late. It's like, just letting you know because you like a phone call. I would rather have texted, but you like to be called, so I called you, and you're like, yeah, I'm running late too. Now it could be that we're casual, right? So it doesn't have to be exactly on time, but it's good to let people know, right? You especially like to be, and I think that it's funny that you're in victim mode because you have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. All you got to do is practice getting up earlier.
I know. Well, I
If you
live,
get up at 4 in the morning, 6 o'clock is pretty damn late.
but I noticed this right away because we've talked about this. We've talked about being in victim mode and being a victim about things. And I'm sick of doing that. I am so sick of doing that. And so seeing it is the beginning. Awareness is the beginning, right? Seeing it is the beginning of getting rid of it.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of back and forth in the early days, so it's not something to like.
Sometimes it's just a glimmer,
Yeah,
right?
just a very little.
Or maybe it's a thought that is just like, I think there's something wrong. And then, like
Yeah,
Mike
that's
says,
the beginning.
yeah, people don't want to delve deep and and sometimes it takes a lot of dissatisfaction and sadness before you're willing to dig a little deeper or keep the window open longer.
Yeah, some people's rock bottom's a little different than other people's rock. So, gang, I do have to jump on another one, but I really loved this conversation. I think we should continue it, both micro and macro, how we facilitate change and what are the things that have caused us to get here, and how do individuals change? I think it's important.
Yeah, and it's nice to be, I think it's kind of cool to be doing it on a video because people are seeing exactly how change happens.
Yeah,
Yeah, and hopefully they'll notice it in their own lives and say, yeah, this is something that I'm seeing working in my own life or not working in my own life.
Right. Very good. All right, everybody.
All
Take
right,
good care.
everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
great care,
Thank you,
gang.
Mike. We'll see you next time.
Bye bye.